Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, I'll be discussing my thoughts on episode 5 of the anime series Beautiful Bones, Sakurako's Investigation. And by and large, this episode played out fairly closely to my speculations as to how it would. Very much was it surrounding this painting and the components, thereupon that were having ill effects on this guy's health and his psyche to a point. Arguably, everything down to the green paint, which was said to be arsenic-based and something that was very much in use in the 18th and 19th centuries, something along those lines. And as well as just the time of year that it happens to be as the story's unfolding, with the rains and the moisture and the humidity and everything adding to this mold. It's the same kind of mold, we're told, by Sakurako that is, very commonly will you find growing on wallpaper and things of that sort. And they're just playing havoc with this guy's health, his breathing, and everything like that. And are we seeing, I had actually thought one thing that I had gotten wrong in my speculations was that it was something falling along the lines of the novel Fletch by Gregory MacDonald, as well as the film, where I thought this guy was effectively trying to fake his death and maybe spirit away with someone he was having these clandestine meetings and phone calls with, whom, we found to be much more malevolent seemingly in the grander scheme of things by the end of this episode. And in fact, was he really just all consumed with the financial well-being of his daughter and his wife, and he was willing to kill himself? It's kind of like, as was the case in the previous episode, there's a point where he leaves to go get the birthday cake, and I was very much feeling like, oh, he's never coming back again. He's going to be the corpse for the episode. And very much, again, I had that same feeling when he goes out to have this one last smoke and everything. And we see that he's determined to do whatever it is he's going to set upon himself to do. And that's very much to attack himself with an axe, try to bleed out right there as sort of a character reference to corroborate this idea of, being all consumed with a family curse. He's done his homework. All of those elements that I had speculated as to why he put so much effort into it played out to be true, but in fact, whereas I thought he was just trying to fake his death, no, he really was going to try to kill himself. And I love how it parallels the story that Utsumi says. Utsumi rose to the challenge of this episode. Very impressive was his character to me in the fact that after telling this story about he and this guy when they knew each other back in school and they had found this wounded baby crow, and even after coming under the attack of the mother crow, they were trying to help it, and unfortunately it died and everything. But do we see Utsumi actually picking up this guy, hoisting this guy onto his back and trying to run to this ambulance that can't make its way straight to the house because of that car blocking the path, much as we saw it came into play, as I speculated it would, in the fact that they had to take a sort of roundabout route to the house in the previous episode in the first place. And as interesting as all of those elements were, predictably though some of them may have been, I was very much left with something far more interesting, to me at least. By the end of this episode, we have sort of a post-credits end cap, which is kind of a happily ever after kind of thing, where we're seeing Kagami is there, the family friend that's always bringing the fruits and vegetables over. Little Ii-chan, seeing little Ii-chan, I was so happy to find that this little girl, her life is much more prosperous than it was, than the tragedy that had befallen her in, episodes previous. She's staying with relatives now, and I was just really happy to have that check-in with her. Sakurako has taken the dog officially, renamed it and all, like we see the dog in the OP, so you could pretty much figure that was going to be the case. But there were two overarching things I was left, speculatory things. One was actually something that occurred to me after the previous episode, and I feel may or may not have been strengthened by the way this end cap plays out, as well as a whole new line of thinking to do very much with Sakurako's being all consumed with this malevolent benefactor, this painting appraiser, as I say, who seems to have been intentional in his wanting to keep this family in close proximity to that painting, so that something ill might befall them, if not death all told. One of the things was, as we have this sequence play out, Tatewaki is underneath this tree once again, and we see this flashback of Sakurako calling back to her, presumably her younger brother, whom she claims is dead, and she says something to herself that even Tatewaki overhears and responds to, at least he's aware of it, but she says something along the lines of wishing or suspecting she had more time. What does that mean? My initial suspicion was, with how closely this dog was paying attention to Sakurako in the last episode and in this episode as well, even going so far as to sort of bark for help when the dog senses this guy's trying to kill himself and everything, wants to stop it. This dog has a greater awareness, and there's a lot of talk about its being able to sense death. And I began to wonder after the last episode, could its being all consumed with staying at the side of Sakurako be a sense of death that doesn't necessarily pertain to the fact that she manipulates and reconstructs bones and bone matter and, things that are dead, that she has a hand in that, so to speak? Could it be something more befitting and, aligning to her own fate? Might we see that Sakurako's not long for the wind? Maybe she has a terminal disease. Maybe she has some sense that her time on this mortal coil is limited, and it's something subconsciously being signaled with all of these flashbacks to the seeming spirit of her brother, this brother who is dead, supposedly. Could it be that she feels like it's getting that much closer to her, that her time is that much more limited with every step forward? She's taking steps toward her own end, something along those lines, something very ominous indeed, in the fact that she's very much, as I've talked about, a Sherlockian kind of character, a very heroic character. And I just thought it was absolutely fascinating being able to see into the mind's eye of Sakurako, talking about the bones and the details of all of the, the sketchy elements of this mystery with this guy and the painting and the family and everything. She refers to it as the bones are not coming together. So it's very much in her mind, the visualization of that transformation where she clasps her hands together and the bones reform, and these animals that are like just made of bone are walking alongside her when she's about to crack or, sort of get down to the nitty-gritty of a given mystery, and solve it. It's very much speaking to her internal sort of viewpoint and the idea that all of these elements are like bones, and that she's reconstructing them in her mind. So it gives that much more validity to why you have that, dramatic transformation sequence every single episode anyway. But the idea that in this particular event, maybe she is aware of this dog's being so consumed with her, having to do with her own time being limited. Maybe she has some subconscious recognition in the fact that she's seeing these flashbacks. The more abundant they become, maybe the more she's convinced she's nearing her own end. And, for somebody who is a champion of good, a champion of justice, even though she didn't necessarily ask for that, she's still very much living up to being a Sherlock-like character. So it's that much more tragic if that plays out to be the case. But another line of speculation I was left with by the end of this episode has very much to do with sort of spinning out from that. We had her talking about her little brother being dead, and I began to wonder, my suspicions arose when she saw this flashback in this particular episode of this younger brother with darker hair than we've seen him with as yet, as though when he gets older, the hair goes from lighter brown to a darker brown, maybe with age. And when we've been seeing this malevolent benefactor, very much, if I'm referring to her as being a very Sherlock-like character, I'm getting the sense of the malevolence of whomever this puppet master manipulator is, being very much akin to the Moriarty for her Sherlock in this particular series, her arch nemesis. Just very dark and malevolent does this puppet master benefactor seem to be, and may or may not arguably have had a hand in all of the sort of, the construction of all of the cases previous that we have as yet seen in this series, because of that butterfly motif being so ever-present time and time again. Like if you go back to the Ichan episode, toward the end, you had Sakurako reacting to the crowd as though she were looking for someone. And I began to wonder if it was something along the lines of, kind of, if you've ever seen The Empire Strikes Back, there's a dialogue sequence between the Force spirit of Obi-Wan Kenobi and Luke Skywalker, where if you know the twist as to Darth Vader's actual relation to Luke and everything like that, I won't spoil that here in case you've never seen Star Wars, but suffice to say, Obi-Wan Kenobi describes it as being down to a certain point of view. And when Sakurako refers to her brother as being dead, I began to wonder, because of, I'm starting to like see familiarity between whomever this malevolent benefactor is and these callbacks to this younger brother. Could we actually be seeing hints that maybe they are one and the same? Maybe this was not a little boy who was murdered or killed in an accident that Sakurako lost in her youth. Could it instead be, because of her sense of justice, her sense of internal morals and all of these things, it's somebody who is dead to her, whom she considers to be dead because of their own ill choices, criminalistic choices, or psychosis befalling them. Maybe this is something where her brother had stolen away and become criminalistic, had become, whereas I've talked about her kind of being Sherlockian in the sense of being like a high-functioning sociopath, but for the greater good, for a sense of justice, which seems to be what compels her nature. How do we know it's not a polar opposite thing, where the brother, somewhat, a couple of years younger, whatever it is, turned a darker path? And her sense is not necessarily one of a very malevolent fate befalling her, where she doesn't have, she thought she'd have that much more time to herself to live out her life and to continue her journey on this mortal coil. Could it be rather the time is coming for reunification that she's not ready for, that she doesn't feel like she can necessarily endure, where she might have to be confronted with this brother in this malevolent adult form that was never really dead, but that she considered dead because of all the poor ill choices he may have made. These are the two primary speculations I have by the end of this episode that I find much more compelling than the actual sort of conclusion of this mystery surrounding this family curse and the painting and everything. Just the idea that maybe Sakurako has a sense of her own fate being limited, that she might be coming and nearing ever closer with every step forward her own end, and her brother's spirit signifying that in her own mind's eye, or that it's something much, far more nefarious in the idea that maybe she has considered her little brother to be dead, but he's really not, and he's whomever this is roving around with this butterfly motif, and their reunification, their coming back together and having to confront each other, is that much closer on the horizon. I really don't know. These are the speculations I'm left with by the end of this particular episode, and I'm just enraptured by it. I really can't wait to see how this is all going to play out, and it's got me that much more excited for it, quite honestly. In the aftermath, again, as I say, of the conclusion of this painting and the family curse and everything, it played out close enough to how I speculated, to the point where it was satisfying enough, but these lingering aspects, the bones that have yet to come together, to use Sakurako's own sort of referencing point, of these aspects to do with the brother, whether this is a spirit she's seeing and envisioning in her mind, or whether this is, sort of a hallmark of a confrontation that has yet to take place. It's just all kinds of compelling. And I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below what you thought of episode 5 of Beautiful Bones, Sakurako's investigation. If you've seen it, if your speculations and your interest and your intrigue are ramped up to the nth degree like mine are, in trying to understand and figure out what exactly it is that Sakurako is trying to cope with, and understand why she feels like she is, something is hallmarking in her mind that she doesn't have much time left, or that something is just on the horizon. Could that be her own fate, as I say, coming to its end? Could that be a confrontation of the ages with whomever this malevolent benefactor is? And, I'm not just saying the only possibility could be, is it maybe her brother had grown up and been a criminal and, sort of psychotic, and that's the confrontation. For all I know, this could be somebody who was involved in her brother's death, and he really did die as a child and all this kind of stuff. That's what I find so compelling about this story, and why I'd love to hear from you as far as what you think it's all going to amount to. And so, yeah, otherwise that'll be pretty much it for me on this. Hope this video finds you well, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.